The early spring rain had only just begun to dry on the wide sidewalks of downtown Portland when Piper Bell stepped off the streetcar, clutching a second-hand canvas satchel and a coffee she could barely afford. She paused on the corner, blinking up at the sleek glass facade of the building that housed Evergreen and Gold, one of the city's most prestigious event planning firms. Her breath hitched in that quiet, private way one experiences when standing on the threshold of something important. Inside, everything smelled like lavender polish and expensive ambition. The marble floor gleamed. The elevator whispered open like a secret, swallowing her into a world she had only ever glimpsed in press clippings and LinkedIn posts. As she rode to the 15th floor, Piper ran her fingers over the edge of her resume, folded once and already soft with handling. She had triple-checked every line. Still, the words felt thinner than her determination. Piper had graduated just 3 weeks prior with a degree in environmental communication, a major that had made her mother frown and her academic advisor say things like important but impractical. She had loved it anyway. She had written essays on ecological storytelling, given a passionate thesis presentation on corporate greenwashing, and once organized a guerrilla recycling campaign on campus. None of that, however, had prepared her for the gloss and gleam of Evergreen and Gold. She was met at the front desk by a woman in black heels and sharper eyebrows who introduced herself only as Danielle. Her words moved briskly, like typed instructions. Piper followed her through a minimalist hallway framed with photographs of past events, lush fundraisers, galas soaked in golden light, launch parties for brands that smelled like eucalyptus and money. Piper nodded along, absorbing names and schedules, her stomach flipping in time with the click of Danielle's heels. "So this is your desk," Danielle announced, gesturing to a workspace tucked near a window. "You will shadow Talia, do what she does, ask if you must, but mostly learn. The Evergreen Spring Gala is this Friday. Big deal, no mistakes." Piper smiled, the corners of her mouth taut with nerves. "Absolutely. Thank you for this opportunity. I will give it everything." Danielle's expression did not change. "We prefer results over enthusiasm." As the woman swept away, Piper exhaled slowly. Outside the window, the city breathed beneath a haze of lingering rain. She took a seat, set down her bag, and opened her notebook to a blank page. She wrote the date at the top in neat, careful print. Day 1, do not mess this up. Behind her, phones buzzed. People laughed in tones that sounded expensive and efficient. Somewhere nearby, a printer came to life. Piper looked around and told herself she belonged here, not because anyone had told her so, but because she had something to prove, and she was not leaving until she did. By midweek, Piper had grown accustomed to the rhythm of her internship, fetching vegan pastries no one ate, taking color-coded notes during meetings, and nodding silently while Talia, her mentor, maneuvered through logistics with the precision of a military commander. The Evergreen Spring Gala was the talk of every corridor. Everyone moved like they were operating within a countdown, and Piper, though still invisible to most, was learning how to anticipate the currents just beneath the surface. It was Thursday morning when the rupture happened. Talia did not show up. Danielle's heels struck the polished floor with sharper-than-usual purpose as she strode across the open office. Her voice cut through the murmur of keyboards and coffee cups. "Piper Bell," she called. Piper's head snapped up, nearly knocking over her compostable water bottle. "Come with me," Danielle said, already turning. In a glass-walled conference room, Danielle closed the door behind them with a sound like finality. Piper stood awkwardly, notebook in hand, heart ticking like a metronome out of sync. "Talia has the flu," Danielle said. "She will not be back until next week." Piper nodded, still waiting for the relevant part. "You will take her place supporting the Spring Gala team." There was a pause. I am sorry," Piper blinked. "You heard me. The guest list includes several members of City Council, the regional director of the Environmental Protection Alliance, and, of course, Ethan Hayes." Piper knew the name. Everyone did. Ethan Hayes was the polished face of Solnora, the man who had once planted 2,000 trees with his own hands and then turned that gesture into a billion-dollar brand. He was either a visionary or a myth, depending on whom you asked. His company had been named lead sponsor of the gala months before, and his presence was the shining star at the end of the invitation list. "I do not think I am the best person," Piper began, voice faltering. Danielle raised a single eyebrow. "It is not a matter of what you think. It is a matter of what is required." Piper's fingers tightened around her pen. "You will liaise with catering, finalize guest logistics, and prepare the digital content for projection during the sponsor acknowledgments. Oh, and Ethan Hayes arrives early. Someone needs to ensure his team has everything they need." Piper's throat was dry. "Me." Danielle turned to leave. "The event is tomorrow evening. Do not disappoint." Alone in the glass room, Piper sat down slowly. Her palms were damp. Across the table, the schedule for the gala was printed in precise blocks of time and color. Her name, typed in bold at the bottom of the staffing list, looked completely out of place, like graffiti on a gallery wall. A tech gala, a billionaire, a room full of expectations. She whispered the words to herself, not sure if they were a promise or a prayer. "Okay, Piper, do not mess this up." The following morning began, in a blur of emails and adrenaline. Piper arrived at the office by 7:15 a.m., 20 minutes earlier than usual, hair tied back in what she hoped was a style that read competent rather than panicked. She carried 3 reusable bags stuffed with samples, chargers, and backup chargers. The air inside evergreen and gold was sharper than usual, tinged with espresso and a palpable tension. People moved briskly, answering questions before they were asked, checking things that had already been checked twice. Determined not to drown in her own nervous energy, Piper dove headfirst into her tasks. The name tags came first. She sat in front of the label printer, her laptop humming beside her, a spreadsheet open like a battlefield of titles and affiliations. She typed, matched, printed. But in her haste, and partly because the spreadsheet columns had shifted, she mismatched nearly a dozen of the VIP tags. A city council member's name now read Dr. Elena Kingsley, Solnora board chair. The actual Dr. Kingsley was instead demoted to a generic sustainability enthusiast. Worse, a nameplate for Ethan Hayes' executive assistant simply read Eric something, which she had typed in frustration, planning to fix later. She did not. Next came the promotional materials. A courier had just dropped off 5 crates of custom Solnora brochures, freshly printed with glossy covers and QR codes linking to their new Green Tech, Real Impact campaign. Piper, seeing that the brochures were slightly off-white instead of bright white, panicked, assuming a misprint, and authorized the backup box to be used instead. Only the backups were from the previous year, touting an outdated carbon offset program that had since been quietly discontinued. She loaded them into gift bags for every guest. By mid-afternoon, her inbox was a battlefield. One of the caterers had sent an urgent message asking about the revised floor plan. Piper, thinking she had replied earlier, had only saved a draft. The delivery window was now missed. The vegan hors d'oeuvres had been rerouted to the wrong entrance, and the kitchen staff was texting her images of wilting canapés under a sun lamp. She tried to call Danielle for advice. No answer. She tried to email the event coordinator. Server delay. She tried not to cry in the supply closet. Partial success. By 4:30 p.m., the ballroom was slowly transforming. Green floral arrangements, bamboo centerpieces, lighting rigs casting warm gold over the polished wood floor. But Piper could feel the cracks beneath the beauty. Everything looked fine, but she knew what was lurking in the details. She double-checked the welcome slideshow just before closing her laptop. There it was, slide 7, showing last year's Solnora team photo, complete with their old logo. No time to fix it. As she stood amid the humming preparations, Walkie-talkie clipped awkwardly to her belt. Piper whispered under her breath. "Impress them," you said. "Be bold," you said. "Just maybe. Do not ruin the entire event." Her voice sounded small beneath the chandeliers, but no one was listening. Not yet. The gala shimmered. The Portland Conservatory's Grand Hall had been transformed into a living forest under chandeliers. Ferns curled at the base of glass sculptures. Eucalyptus branches arched from the ceiling, and soft amber lights mimicked the hush of twilight through trees. Every table bore a name tied to a threatened ecosystem. At the center of it all stood a sleek, curved stage, prepared for the night's keynote speakers and honorees. Piper stood near the tech booth, wearing a headset that felt too tight, with a clipboard clutched so hard her knuckles had gone white. She had spent the last 2 hours directing volunteers, calming a florist who had spilled composted moss down the main aisle, and reattaching name tags where necessary, though not before several guests had politely pointed out their incorrect titles. "Deep breath, Piper," she told herself. "You survived the name tags, you survived the hors d'oeuvres. One more hour." The welcome speeches concluded. The mayor had spoken. The wine was flowing. It was now time for the highlight of the night. Ethan Hayes, founder and CEO of Solnera, environmental darling and whispered billionaire, was about to take the stage. Piper received the cue through her headset. 5 seconds until Ethan walks out. Audio ready. She glanced at the screen, saw the file labeled Keynote Intro Final, MP3, and hit play. Music filled the room, but it was not the intended instrumental blend of cello and rainfall. A twangy acoustic guitar rang out, then a voice, nasal, ironic, unmistakably mocking. "Recycle your soul, ride a carbon-free pony. While sipping on smoothies in reusable cups. Let us greenwash your guilt, make it holy. And charge you 3 times as much." Laughter, not the warm, polite kind. The audience shifted. A few heads turned. A man at table 8 choked on his champagne. On stage, Ethan Hayes had paused mid-step. One foot hovered above the stairs. His face remained unreadable, the polished mask of someone trained to speak through fire alarms. Piper froze. For a full second she could not move. Her heart dropped so violently it felt like gravity had shifted. Then her fingers flew, scrambling at the keyboard trying to stop the song. A button slipped under her touch. The second verse began. "We planted one tree, called it a forest. Sold you the dream in a compostable box." Finally, silence. She had yanked the master volume cable free. But the damage was done. Ethan finished his walk to the podium slowly, deliberately. The room had gone from laughter to a charged hush. He adjusted the mic. "Well," he said, voice even, "I suppose that is one way to start a conversation." Polite laughter scattered the room like crumbs. But it was the kind of laugh guests gave when they were trying to decide if they had just witnessed brilliance or a complete disaster. Piper sank behind the tech booth, invisible, mortified, already composing an apology letter in her head. The words would not come. All she could think was, "I played a parody about greenwashing. For the green tech CEO. At his own gala." Her face burned hot, and somewhere in the haze of panic, humiliation, and horror, she knew this was no longer just about a mistake. This was the moment everything would change. The aftermath of the incident hung in the air long after the applause faded. Ethan Hayes had delivered his speech with practiced ease, barely a stutter, even managing to fold in a passing joke about unexpected opening acts and the honesty of satire. The audience had laughed, grateful for the chance to return to their wine and polite networking, but Piper knew better. His poise was armor. And she was the reason he needed it. Danielle found her near the back hallway 20 minutes later, where Piper had been pretending to inventory brochures while actually trying not to throw up into a cardboard recycling bin. "He wants to speak with you, now." Piper blinked. "Who?" Danielle did not answer. She did not need to. Piper followed her through a narrow corridor past the green room. Ethan Hayes stood near a tall window that framed the lights of the city like a painting. He had removed his jacket, rolled up his sleeves. He looked like someone who was used to being in charge of difficult conversations and winning them. Danielle gestured, then left, the door clicking shut behind her. Piper swallowed. Her voice came out too fast. "Mr. Hayes, I am so sorry. That music, it was never meant to." "Mock me in public," he said calmly, not turning. "Or make me the face of a punchline in front of half the city's donors." Piper froze. She did not know whether to defend herself or nod and take it. "I thought the file was the correct one. The folders were mislabeled. I was trying to fix another slide. I never even listened to the other audio. I should have. That was on me. Entirely." He turned now slowly. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes, striking an ice pale under the dim hallway lights, rested on her with quiet intensity. "You are the intern," he said, almost like a question. "Yes, Piper Bell. This was my first major assignment." There was a pause. "Explains the chaos," he said, then added more thoughtfully, "but not the apology. Most people in this room would have blamed the equipment, the system, or someone already gone for the night." "I am not most people," Piper said before she could stop herself. He studied her for a long second, not in the way men sometimes looked at women, but like he was trying to decipher the exact chemical composition of what had just happened. Her sincerity seemed to confuse him more than her error. "You know," he said at last, "I have given this keynote 12 times in the past 5 years. Same script, same praise, same curated applause. Tonight, for 10 seconds, everyone in that room looked up, actually looked up, even if it was to laugh." Piper stared. "Are you saying you are glad it happened?" "No," Ethan said. "I am saying it was different, and that matters." He turned back toward the window. Piper took the hint and stepped backward toward the door, but his voice stopped her. "Piper Bell." "Yes." "You are not fired." She blinked. "That is good to know." "And next time," he added, his tone lighter now, almost amused, "make sure the satire plays after the speech. It will hit better." She nodded, heart still galloping. As she stepped out into the cool air of the hallway, she could not help but wonder if what had just passed between them had been more than a reprimand. There had been something else, brief and electric, beneath the words, like recognition. Or maybe it was just adrenaline. She was, after all, still wearing the wrong shoes and carrying a clipboard full of bad decisions. But as the door closed behind her, her pulse was still echoing with one thought. He remembered my name. The gala had thinned into its final, glimmering breaths. Candles flickered low in crystal holders. Waitstaff moved like shadows, clearing glasses and collecting abandoned napkins. Outside the main ballroom, the laughter had dulled to murmurs and the music, finally the correct playlist, whispered softly beneath the high ceilings. Piper slipped out a side door, drawn by the need for air she could actually breathe. She found herself on a narrow balcony that overlooked the Willamette River. The chill of the night kissed her bare shoulders. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying not to shiver. "Thought I might find you here." She turned. Ethan Hayes stepped through the open door, hands in his pockets, jacket replaced by a subtle charcoal sweater that made him seem less like a CEO and more like a man trying to escape something. He leaned against the iron railing beside her, not too close. "You followed me," she said, half amused, half cautious. "No, I escaped," he said simply. "This is the only place in the building where no one expects anything." They stood in silence for a moment. Below them, the river moved slowly, dark and reflective. Portland's lights shimmered across the water, an illusion of stars. "I thought you would be at the VIP after reception," Piper said. "I was for 10 minutes, enough to shake hands, fake a smile, sip half a glass of something I did not order, and then someone asked if I felt inspired. I knew it was time to leave." She smiled faintly. "And do you feel inspired?" His eyes flicked toward her, the corner of his mouth lifting in something like irony. "Not tonight." "I know the feeling," she said quietly. He studied her. "You do not strike me as the type to get discouraged easily." Piper hesitated. "I am not discouraged, just disoriented. I spent years studying environmental theory, believing communication could shift culture, that if people heard the truth in the right way, they would change. But here, it is all lighting and sponsorships and compostable coasters. I do not know if it means anything." Ethan nodded slowly. "I built a company to try and solve things that scared me. Climate collapse, ecological grief, the big questions. But the larger we grew, the more abstract everything became. I wake up in the morning and spend half the day deciding which numbers make us look the most ethical. Some days I do not recognize the version of me people applaud." Piper turned to face him fully. "So why keep doing it?" His voice was quiet now, almost brittle. "Because if I stop, I am afraid someone worse will take my place, someone who does believe the applause." That landed between them with the weight of something raw and real. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then, softly, Piper asked, "Do you ever feel like you are pretending to be the person everyone expects you to be?" Ethan exhaled. "Only on days that end in Y." She laughed, soft, startled, genuine. He smiled at the sound. The wind picked up, brushing past them like a whisper. She watched as his gaze drifted toward the city beyond. "I think," Piper said, "that even the wrong song can say something true." He looked at her then, eyes sharper than before. He did not answer, not directly, but the quiet between them had shifted. It was no longer the silence of strangers. When he finally turned to go, he paused in the doorway. "You should get some sleep, Piper Bell. Tomorrow will be loud." She stayed a while longer on the balcony, listening to the river and the fatting sounds of the gala below. And for the first time since the night began, she felt still. Something had changed, not everything, but something. And that was enough to begin. The invitation arrived not through email, but through a neatly folded note slipped beneath Piper's office tablet the following Monday morning. Her name, written in confident, slanted handwriting, was centered across the top. Inside, the message was brief. "Private working session, Solnora HQ, Wednesday 9 a.m. Ask for Clara. E." No fanfare, no details, no explanation of why a barely qualified intern who had almost publicly sabotaged a gala was being summoned to a private meeting at one of the most influential green tech companies in the Pacific Northwest. Piper reread the note 3 times, her heart hammering faster each time. It was not a joke, or at least, if it was written in perfect penmanship on expensive recycled linen stock. 2 days later, dressed in her best version of strategic casual, Piper arrived at Solnora's sleek, open-concept campus in the Pearl District. The building was a sun-drenched lattice of glass and reclaimed wood, nestled between art galleries and eco-boutiques. Inside, everything pulsed with quiet innovation: green walls, light filtered through solar-optimized panels, and people who looked like they had their lives entirely figured out. Clara, a composed woman with an earpiece and effortless posture, guided Piper through security and into a high-ceilinged room with floor-to-ceiling whiteboards, suspended screens, and a table shaped like a riverbed. 8 people sat around it, including Ethan. He looked up as Piper entered and nodded once, as though her presence had been inevitable. "Piper Bell, meet the strategy core," he said. "Today's focus: sustainable infrastructure in urban redevelopment. You have 10 minutes to listen. After that, speak up or go home." The others barely blinked. Some looked curious. Others clearly wondered who she was. The discussion began, fast, layered, filled with acronyms she had only skimmed in academic journals. They tossed ideas like currency, water-neutral construction, bioreactive facades, tech-driven green zoning. Piper sat silently, scribbling terms in the margin of her notebook, her pulse erratic. Then came a lull, a disagreement over retrofitting existing buildings versus investing in new smart grid districts. The room teetered on repetition. And Piper spoke. "I think you are asking the wrong question," she said, carefully. "It is not whether you rebuild or retrofit. It is whether the communities you are building for have been asked what they need. Tech means nothing if it is designed for investors instead of neighborhoods." There was silence, a long one. A man in a crisp navy blazer leaned forward. "And you are?" "Intern," she said, "but also someone who grew up in a low-income neighborhood that was called blighted until it became marketable." Someone coughed. Someone else began nodding. Ethan smiled, not widely, but with a kind of recognition. "She stays," he said. The room moved forward, and so did Piper, asked for input twice more, handed a tablet to annotate projections, invited back the following week. She left the meeting dizzy, unsure if she had crossed a threshold or simply brushed against it. But one thing was certain, she had not gone unnoticed. Not by Ethan, and not by the future she had barely dared to imagine. By the end of the week, Piper's badge granted her access to meeting rooms no other intern even knew existed. Her mornings began not with sorting floral invoices or updating seating charts, but with quietly slipping into Solnera's side entrance and heading up to the executive floor, where her presence still drew the occasional raised eyebrow from senior staff. She was no longer just the intern who had ruined a keynote. She was now the intern Ethan Hayes personally requested by name. At first it was small things, a marketing memo for a tree-planting campaign, a tagline for Solnera's upcoming sustainability pledge, a draft video script meant to air during Earth Month. Ethan would send it to her, often late at night, sometimes with only a question mark typed in the subject line. He never explained what he wanted her to say. He just waited. And she answered. She told him what sounded false, what felt overdesigned, what rang hollow to someone outside the boardroom bubble. At first, she expected to be gently ignored. Instead, he listened. "I like your voice," he said once, handing back a speech draft she had torn apart with margin notes. "You say what I no longer hear in this place." In the halls of evergreen and gold, the shift was impossible to miss. Danielle eyed her differently now, curious, but sharp-edged. Talia, recently recovered, returned with clipped professionalism and a new tendency to assign Piper only menial tasks when Ethan was not around. Conversations at the office quieted when she entered a room. Laughter restarted only when she left. There were whispers. She must be sleeping with him. She played a song, now she is playing the game. How does an intern get meetings with Ethan Hayes when even partners wait weeks? Piper heard it all. She pretended she did not. But sometimes, when she returned to her desk, she would catch the tail end of a glance or a sentence paused midword, and it felt like walking into a room with her name written on the walls in disappearing ink. Still she stayed. Not because she enjoyed the scrutiny, but because for the first time she was being asked to shape something larger than herself. Ethan's trust, whatever its motives, had unlocked a part of her that had been quiet for too long. She found herself rewriting not only messages but meanings. She questioned buzzwords, challenged legacy slogans, and suggested a campaign rooted in transparency rather than promise. When the team launched a new interactive map of Solnera's clean energy projects, it was Piper's voice in the introductory narration. Clear, honest, measured. Ethan never praised her in public, but during a brief elevator ride one evening, he glanced sideways at her reflection in the mirrored doors. "You know," he said, "I thought hearing idealists would slow us down, but you are forcing the machine to think. That is rarer than talent." She did not reply. She did not need to. But she went home that night with her notebook open on the bed beside her, and wrote one word across the top of a blank page. Scene. The Saturday morning air was sharp with pine and promise. The community reforestation event had been pitched as a partnership between Solnora and the city of Portland, a hands-on initiative to restore a neglected stretch of land along the East Bank. There were tents set up for check-in, rows of young trees waiting to be planted, and compostable name tags fluttering slightly in the breeze. Piper had arrived early, boots muddy before 8 o'clock, sleeves rolled to her elbows, clipboard tucked under one arm like a badge of competence. She had expected to spend the morning organizing volunteers and explaining where the compost toilets were. She had not expected Ethan to show up in a thermal vest and worn hiking boots, sleeves similarly rolled, the usual polish of his world traded for something rougher, realer. "You actually came," she said, half teasing. He arched an eyebrow. "You thought I would not. I thought you might send someone with a drone and a press release." He grinned faintly. "Tempting, but I figured if we are going to plant metaphors, we might as well plant trees too." They spent the morning working side by side, digging, placing saplings, tamping the soil gently around tender roots. Volunteers moved around them, families, students, retirees in neon vests, and Piper found herself forgetting moment by moment that the man beside her owned a company worth more than some cities. They broke for water around 11. She handed him a compostable cup and sat beside him on the edge of a supply crate. The sun had broken through the clouds just enough to cast a gold wash over the clearing. "Why trees?" she asked. Ethan sipped and shrugged. "Because they are slow, because no one plants one for themselves." She nodded, wiping a smudge of dirt from her cheek. "Because they remind you that growth is never instant." He looked at her then, long enough that she felt the shape of the silence between them shift. "You talk like someone who's had to wait for things," he said. "I have," she answered. "Most people have, they just pretend they didn't." A child nearby laughed as her father lifted her over a freshly planted fir. A group of volunteers cheered when they hit their 50th tree. Piper glanced over and saw a teenager wearing a shirt that read "Make soil, not noise." She smiled. "I like this," she said. "It's messy but honest." "It is," Ethan agreed. "More than the galas, more than the branding meetings. This is the work that no one photographs well." They returned to planting, the rhythm now familiar. At one point their hands brushed over the same sapling. He paused, let her settle there first. By the time the afternoon wound down and the last tree was in the ground, Piper was covered in dirt, aching at the shoulders but lighter somehow. Ethan walked her to her car, not out of formality but something quieter, habit maybe, hope. As she opened the door, he said, "You know, I used to think leadership was about being in control. And now I think it is about knowing who to listen to before it is too late." She met his eyes. Neither of them said the obvious. Instead, she gave a tired smile and said, "You are not terrible at planting trees." He stepped back, hand over his heart. "The highest praise I have received all week." She drove away with the windows down, hands still dirty and heart humming like something newly unearthed, something beginning. The rain came without warning, sweeping in from the western hills like a forgotten promise. It began as a drizzle, gentle, almost apologetic, softening the earth beneath their boots and dotting the leaves of newly planted saplings. Volunteers scurried to collapse tents and load gear into vans, laughter echoing beneath the sudden drumbeat on canvas. Piper stood near the tree line, hands on her hips, hair already curling under the weight of moisture, as the downpour thickened into something unmistakably spring-like and wild. Ethan approached from across the field, his sweater darkened with rain, the ends of his sleeves dripping. He held a clipboard that was now utterly useless, papers smeared into blurred watercolor versions of plans and checklists. "I believe," he called out, squinting through the rain, "that nature just vetoed our timeline." Piper laughed, tossing her hair out of her eyes. "It is democracy in its purest form." He stopped a few steps from her, chest rising with breath, a streak of mud along his jaw. They were alone now, or close enough. Only a few distant figures moving beneath the trees, the storm having cleared most of the noise. The air between them pulsed. "You look," he began, then shook his head, almost embarrassed. "I do not know what the word is." "Wet," she offered, grinning. "Alive," he said, voice low. Piper blinked, unsure whether to laugh again or step away. Her heart thudded, sudden and unreasonably loud. She felt the moment unspooling, delicate and irreversible. The sound of rain blurred the rest of the world, turning the moment into a soft enclosure where only the two of them existed. He stepped closer, not in the polished way she had seen him move at press events or boardrooms, but carefully, like someone walking through uncharted woods. "You can tell me to stop," he said. She did not speak. She did not need to. And then he kissed her. It was not perfect. His hands were damp, her lip was cold, and a drop of rain slid between their mouths at the exact wrong moment. But it was real, honest. A collision of fear and wonder, of restraint broken by a truth neither of them had fully named until now. When they broke apart, Piper stared up at him, her breath ragged. "This is a terrible idea," she said. "I know," he murmured, still close. "It feels like one. But I am not sorry." Thunder rumbled distantly, low and indulgent. Somewhere a gull cried out. The rain softened again into mist, leaving them blinking under a silver sky. Piper took a half step back, heart skittering. "I should go. Before I forget, I am supposed to be rational." Ethan nodded once, but his eyes stayed on her as she turned away, boots squelching through the mud. She did not look back, not because she did not want to, but because she knew that if she did, she would not be able to walk away at all. Behind her the trees whispered. Something had been planted today, beyond roots and saplings. Something far less manageable. It happened on a Tuesday. The morning began in its usual rhythm. Early fog, quiet streets, a cup of coffee gone cold on Piper's desk as she revised copy for Solnera's upcoming coastal cleanup campaign. She had barely finished annotating a tagline when her phone buzzed with a news alert. Then another, and another. She clicked. Green Giant under fire. Solnera accused of fabricating environmental impact data. Whistleblowers claim widespread misrepresentation of sustainability metrics. Is Solnera greenwashing on a global scale? The words hit her like a dropped weight. She read them again, slower this time, as if repetition might untangle them into something less real. Reports from two former Solnera employees, an engineer and a data analyst, had surfaced overnight. Their claims were meticulous, backed by internal emails and performance reports. Solnera's lauded carbon-neutral program had allegedly overreported offset numbers by nearly 40%. Their renewable energy usage, once touted as industry-leading, had been reclassified as partial sourcing, with much of the data redacted in investor disclosures. Within hours, the headlines multiplied. News anchors called it a betrayal of trust. Environmental watchdogs circled. Social media erupted with hashtags and fury. The public turned quickly, as it often does, from admiration to outrage. Piper sat frozen at her desk, staring at the screen as if it might blink first. She opened her messages. Nothing from Ethan, nothing from Clara or anyone else at Solnera, just static silence. The kind that meant one of two things: total denial or something even worse, damage control. Talia poked her head into Piper's cubicle. "So," she said, voice deliberately casual, "I guess you were not invited to that strategy meeting." "What meeting?" Piper asked. Talia smiled thinly. "The one where the PR department tried to spin this into a rogue analyst misinterpretation. Nice try, but the story, everywhere. Even The Guardian ran a piece." Piper closed her laptop, pulse pounding. Her skin felt too tight, her thoughts too loud. She needed air, space, something real. She found herself in the stairwell, leaning against the cool wall, the headlines echoing in her skull. Greenwashing, manipulation, false impact reports, investor deception. And all of it tied to a company that had welcomed her, trusted her voice, asked for her ideas, and to a man who had kissed her in the rain and told her she made the machine think. Her hands trembled, because now she had to ask herself the question she never wanted to face. Had he known? Had Ethan Hayes, the man who spoke about purpose and integrity in quiet moments, been lying all along? Or had she simply believed in the illusion too much to see the cracks forming beneath it? Outside, the city kept moving, but for Piper Bell, the ground had shifted, and nothing looked green anymore. Piper did not sleep that night. She lay in bed with the curtains open, watching the gray light of early morning crawl across the ceiling, thinking of all the things Ethan had said to her, about leadership, about truth, about not believing in the applause. Now every word echoed differently, as if someone had taken the conversation and dubbed in a false voice underneath. By 9 o'clock the next morning, she was sitting in a corner booth of a quiet cafe on Alberta Street, the kind with mismatched mugs and protest flyers taped to the window. Marla was already waiting for her, laptop open, glasses pushed up into a dark halo of curls. She was not smiling. "Tell me you are not surprised," Marla said, skipping any kind of greeting. "I do not know what I am," Piper said. "Disappointed." "Yes." "Heartbroken." Piper hesitated. "Maybe." Marla sighed and turned the screen toward her. Articles, documents, screenshots, internal metrics flagged for inconsistencies, deleted files, legal memos, a redacted whistleblower affidavit newly published by a nonprofit watchdog group. "I have been tracking Solnora for months," Marla said. Quietly, there were signs. A few partners backed out quietly last fall. One factory in Nevada shut down without explanation, and now this confirmation. "And you did not tell me?" Piper asked, her voice sharper than she meant it to be. "I did not think you were this close to him. At first, it looked like you were just doing grunt work. Then I saw your voice in the campaigns, your tone, your phrasing. It was like watching a friend's handwriting appear in a place it did not belong." Piper looked down at her tea. The steam was gone. It was just water now. "I thought he listened to me," she said quietly. "I thought he meant what he said." "Maybe he did," Marla replied. "But maybe he needed someone like you, fresh, idealistic, unblemished, to polish the image. Maybe you were not a partner. Maybe you were a prop." The words hit harder than she expected, because part of her had thought them already in the raw silence of that stairwell, in the quiet hours before dawn. Still, hearing them out loud was like being cut open in public. "I need to talk to him," Piper said. "I need to hear him say it." "And what if he lies?" Piper looked out the window, watching a cyclist roll by, drenched in rain, determined and alone. "Then I will know," she said, finally. Marla reached across the table, her fingers resting briefly on Piper's wrist. "Just do not let what he meant to you silence what you know is right." Piper nodded. She stood, slipping her coat on, her mind already racing ahead. The air outside was cold, but she did not flinch as it hit her. She welcomed it. It was time to stop feeling and start finding out. The sky hung low over the Solnora building, swollen with clouds that threatened rain but never delivered. Piper stood outside the revolving glass doors for a long moment before pushing through, her palms damp, her breath shallow. The receptionist gave a startled nod as she passed, but no one stopped her. Whether it was the look in her eyes or the force of something unspoken around her, she moved like someone with permission. She did not call ahead. She did not text. She simply walked the familiar route to Ethan's floor, where the lights were softer, the air more filtered, the silence more expensive. Clara intercepted her halfway down the corridor, all poise and posture. "Miss Bell, he is in a meeting." "He will want to see me," Piper said. Clara studied her for a beat, then stepped aside. Ethan's office was exactly as she remembered: clean lines, living plants in corners, a wall of windows overlooking the city like a kingdom. He was standing near the far end of the room, phone to his ear, gesturing slightly. When he saw her, he paused, murmured a quick goodbye, and set the phone down with practiced calm. "Piper," he said. "Do not," she cut in. "Do not say my name like nothing has happened." He said nothing. She stepped forward, her voice low, tight. "Tell me it is not true. Tell me you did not know." A pause. Then measured, distant, he said, "I cannot discuss ongoing legal matters." She stared at him. "You can speak to me, you just will not." Ethan folded his arms. "It is complicated." "No," she said, louder now. "It is not. Either the company faked its impact data or it did not. Either you knew and let it happen or you were too afraid to stop it. Which is it?" He looked past her toward the window. "There are things you do not understand yet, things I did not see in time. I tried to steer us in the right direction. By planting trees with interns and polishing mission statements," she snapped, "while the foundation was already cracked. I did what I could." She stepped back, voice breaking. "You made me believe in this, in you, and you let me carry your words knowing they were a shield for something rotten." His jaw clenched. "That was never what I wanted." "Then what did you want?" she whispered. "Silence." That silence, thick, aching, deliberate, was the answer. It said more than any polished excuse could. It told her everything she had feared since the first headline broke: that he had known enough, that he had made choices, that somewhere between his ideals and his image something vital had been lost. She blinked hard, chest tight. "You could have told me the truth." "I wanted to protect you," he said. But she was already shaking her head. "You wanted to protect yourself, and you used me to do it." She turned before he could say more. Her footsteps echoed down the hall, past Clara's startled glance, past the plants and the light in the polished walls. This time she did not look back. Behind her, Ethan remained at the window, watching the city, watching nothing at all. The resignation was handwritten. Piper folded the letter once, slipped it into a plain white envelope, and left it on Danielle's desk without waiting for anyone to return from their strategy meeting. No drama, no scene, just silence. By the time the elevator doors closed behind her, she felt her breath uncoil from where it had been trapped in her chest for days. She walked straight out into the afternoon drizzle and kept walking until she reached the train station, where she bought a one-way ticket to the only place that still felt real. 3 hours later, she stepped off the platform in the small town where she had grown up, barely more than a scattering of homes, farms, and forgotten storefronts tucked between forest and river. The hills were still green, the roads still cracked, and the wind still carried the scent of pine and wood smoke, as if no time had passed at all. Her mother's house sat at the end of a gravel path lined with moss-covered stones. The porch light was already on. "I thought I would see you soon," her mother said, opening the door in a faded flannel robe. "I just needed to be here," Piper replied. That first night she slept in her childhood room beneath a ceiling still strung with glow-in-the-dark stars. The wind scratched softly against the windows. No headlines, no calls, no Solnara, just quiet. In the days that followed, she rose with the sun, helped her mother tend to the garden, sat on the porch with a thermos of tea, watching the fog rise off the hills. She reread her old college notebooks, dog-eared essays on environmental storytelling, field notes from sustainability seminars, words she had once believed without hesitation. Now they felt heavier, as if the ink had learned how to betray her too. But there were small salvations. She spent hours walking the trails behind her neighborhood, remembering the first time she had seen a doe with twin fawns. She visited the local food co-op where she used to volunteer, listening to old friends talk about creek restoration and seed-saving initiatives. None of them were famous. None of them had capital or press coverage or sleek branding. But their work was honest. She found herself slowly shedding the weight of Ethan's silence, the sheen of his ambition. The man she had kissed in the rain had not been a lie, but he had not been the whole truth either, and she was no longer willing to stand in the shadows of other people's ideals. One morning, while pulling weeds in her mother's garden, dirt cool against her fingers, she whispered to the quiet earth, "I still believe in this." She was not sure what this meant yet: environmental justice, responsible storytelling, or simply the act of trying again. But she knew it was not gone, only buried. And she could dig. The memory came uninvited. Piper was sifting through an old box in the attic, her father's box, tucked behind stacks of outdated textbooks and rusted garden tools. The cardboard was soft with time, corners blunted, the lid marked in his neat block handwriting, SOLARAFILES, private. She sat cross-legged on the floor, dust blooming into the air around her as she pulled it open. Inside were papers yellowed by the years, investment statements, promotional pamphlets printed on recycled paper, photographs of smiling founders beside gleaming solar panels. One flyer read, "Powering tomorrow, sustainably today." The irony twisted sharp in her chest. She remembered the name now. Solara Tech. It had launched when she was 12, just as green tech began to enter the public imagination. Her father, a high school science teacher with a passion for solar energy and an unshakable belief in progress, had invested almost everything: his pension, their emergency savings, a chunk of her future college fund, into the company. "It is the future," he had said, beaming over breakfast one morning, "and we get to be part of it." For a few months, everything glowed with possibility. There were press releases, interviews, even a photo of her father shaking hands with the founder at a small expo in Eugene. But within a year, it had all unraveled. The tech never scaled. The data had been doctored. The CEO disappeared. And the investors, including Piper's father, were left with nothing but letters from lawyers and a growing silence. He had never really recovered. Not financially, not emotionally. The house had grown quieter after that, less laughter, fewer long talks about the future. He had taken on extra tutoring jobs. Piper remembered how he had paused one night at the dinner table, staring at his reflection in a spoon, and said, "It is not the money that haunts me. It is the fact that I believed." He had passed away 3 years later. Not from shame, she told herself, but from something close to it, a weariness that never quite left his eyes. Now, sitting in the attic, holding the same brochures that had once promised so much, Piper finally understood why the accusations against Solnera had cut so deep. Why Ethan's silence felt like betrayal in her bones. It was not just about truth. It was about history, about legacy, about watching good people be used as scaffolding for someone else's ambition. She gathered the papers into a neat stack, not to burn them, not to forget, but to remember. To carry the weight forward, eyes open this time. She was not her father's daughter because he had been deceived. She was his daughter because he had believed in something bigger than himself. And now it was her turn to defend that belief, without illusion, without naivety, but with all the strength his silence had once tried to protect. The first clue came quietly. Piper had returned to Portland without announcing it. No fanfare, no sweeping declarations. She rented a modest studio on the east side, resumed drinking coffee out of chipped mugs, and reached out to Marla with a single message: "I am ready." They met late at night, in the corner of a newsroom that still smelled like printer ink and overworked ambition. Marla slid over a flash drive. "Anonymous drop," she said. "Encrypted files, internal memos, metadata from archived reports. Could be nothing, could be everything." Piper spent the next 3 days inside a spiral of spreadsheets and suppressed communications. It was all there, just buried. She traced the anomalies, line by line, through backdated environmental reports and investor summaries. Emission metrics marked adjusted. Sustainability initiatives paused without public notice. Carbon offset claims based on double-counted credits. And then came the emails. Lucas Denton, chief financial officer of Solnera. Sharp suits, sharper reputation. He had always stood just behind Ethan at press conferences, silent, poised, forgettable in the way only dangerous people can afford to be. But in these emails, his voice emerged with chilling clarity. We delay the updated impact numbers until after Q4. No need to spook stakeholders over a semantic debate. The Hayes kid wants a full audit. Stall him. Public perception is the asset. Build that, not forests. Piper read the lines again and again. Ethan's name appeared, flagged, occasionally objecting. In one email thread, he wrote, "We promise transparency. If we fudge these offsets, we become exactly what we claim to fight." Lucas's reply, "You want a legacy. I want a company that survives quarterly reports." Ethan had tried. She could see it now in the pushback, the delay tactics thrown at him, the warnings wrapped in numbers. He had not been the architect. He had been a barrier, one slowly removed, one silenced not with violence but with bureaucracy. The board had sided with Lucas. The illusion had become strategy. And Ethan, whatever his flaws, had been outnumbered. Still, Piper's relief did not come clean. He had known. Not from the beginning, maybe, but eventually, and he had chosen silence. She sat in her studio that night, the screen glowing before her, and felt the strange ache of vindication braided with sadness. Ethan had not betrayed her out of malice. He had simply failed to fight hard enough. But Lucas was something else entirely. He had built the illusion. He had turned ideals into marketing currency, and he had to be exposed. Piper picked up her phone, hands steady now. She called Marla. "I found the source," she said, "and I am ready to bring him down." It was just past dusk when he found her. Piper was locking her bike outside the community library where she had been helping catalog materials for a local eco-education initiative. Her hands were still smudged with ink from labeling bins, her hair tucked into a loose braid. The air carried the crisp tang of early spring, and the last of the sunlight clung to the edges of the sky like a breath held too long. She turned at the sound of footsteps, and there he was. Ethan Hayes looked nothing like the man who had once delivered a keynote in a tailored suit, backlit by soft green lights and curated applause. His coat was wrinkled. His shirt was untucked. His eyes, always a touch too clear, were rimmed with exhaustion. He had not shaved. He looked like someone who had finally run out of places to hide. Piper froze, one hand still on the lock. "What are you doing here?" "I had to see you," he said. "You should not be here." "I know." They stood in the quiet between street lamp flickers, in the small town she had retreated to when his silence became unbearable. "I know what you found," he said, his voice rough. "About Lucas, about the board. You knew I was looking." "I hoped you would," he said. "You always had more courage than the rest of us." She crossed her arms, stepping back. "Do not flatter me. You still stayed quiet." "I did," he admitted. "And every day since the story broke, I have felt the weight of that silence. I kept thinking I could fix it from the inside, that if I just waited, just played the long game, I could steer us back. But Lucas was faster and cleaner. He knew how to turn integrity into an inconvenience." "So you gave up." "I tried to fight," he said, "but I fought quietly, and that is the same thing as not fighting at all." Piper looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in weeks. There was no shield left, no charm, just fatigue and regret and something else burning just behind his words. "I am stepping down," he said. "I am going public, but I need the truth to come from more than just me. I need someone who can tell the story clearly, honestly, someone the public still believes." "You want me to help you fix what you let break?" "No," he said. "I want you to help me tear down what should never have been built in the first place." She stared at him, heart heavy, remembering the balcony, the rain, the silence in his office. "What makes you think I would trust you now?" "I do not," he said, "but I trust you." That stopped her. He took a step closer, not pleading but open. "I am not asking for forgiveness," he said. "I am asking for accountability, and I am ready to take it no matter what it costs." Piper looked away, eyes flicking toward the hills beyond town, still lined with the silhouettes of old trees. Slowly, her grip on her bike relaxed. "If we do this," she said, "we do it my way, no edits, no PR." "Your way," he repeated, "all the way." She nodded once, not smiling. "Then we begin tomorrow." And for the first time in too long, Ethan Hayes let out a breath that sounded like something close to hope. The plan unfolded in a dusty co-working space above a bike repair shop, where the Wi-Fi was unpredictable and the windows stuck when it rained. Piper chose it on purpose. No glass towers, no PR firms, no carefully scripted optics, just three people, a table cluttered with coffee cups and cords, and the truth. Ethan sat on one side, notebook open, pen in hand. Gone was the practiced posture of a public figure. He listened more than he spoke now, which felt like progress. Marla, perched across from him, tapped steadily at her laptop, eyes flicking between bullet points and timestamps as she assembled a chronology that could not be dismissed. Piper stood near the whiteboard, arms crossed, reviewing everything they had gathered. Internal emails, financial records, altered carbon offset reports, documentation of board-level decisions to suppress third-party audit findings, names, dates, numbers, all of it ready. "This has to be airtight," Piper said. "We get one chance. If we slip up, they spin it. And this dies in the media cycle within 24 hours. "We are not just exposing Lucas," Marla added, fingers pausing above her keys. "We are tearing down the story Solnara has spent years perfecting. The clean image, the visionary leadership, the miracle tech. People want to believe in that. Some of them need to." Ethan nodded, eyes hollow but focused. "Then we give them something better to believe in, facts." They agreed on the format. An independent press conference, streamed live, no corporate filter. No selective access for friendly outlets. No exclusive interviews. Just a full public release of the files, accompanied by a simple, direct statement from Ethan and a supporting timeline from Piper and Marla. They scheduled it for the following Monday, giving just enough time to verify every document, anticipate counterattacks, and prepare for the storm. The night before, Piper lay awake in her apartment, staring at the cracked ceiling. Her heart was steady now, not calm exactly, but anchored. She had once believed in Ethan Hayes the way a student believes in a great lecturer, not blindly but with a kind of reverence. That was gone. What remained was something harder, sharper, a truth forged not from admiration but from knowing someone's flaws and choosing, in full awareness, to stand beside them anyway, for a cause, not a person. The press conference took place in a modest community hall with a flickering light above the stage and folding chairs arranged in tight rows. Reporters arrived early, drawn by the tension in the headlines and the curiosity of a fall from grace. There were murmurs when Ethan stepped up to the podium, no longer shielded by corporate branding or rehearsed charisma. Piper stood to his left, Marla to his right. Behind them, a screen displayed the opening slide of the full report, Truth Over Optics, an open reckoning with the myth of green. Ethan cleared his throat. No notes, no teleprompter, just his voice, quiet and clear. "I come to you not to defend Solnara or myself, but to confess what should have never been hidden, and to help dismantle what I helped build." It was not a speech, it was an undoing. And when Piper stepped forward next, voice calm, gaze direct, she felt no fear, only purpose. They had once planted trees together. Now they were planting something harder to grow, accountability. And she would make sure it rooted. The aftermath came fast, loud, and without mercy. Within 24 hours of the press conference, Solnera's board convened an emergency session. Lucas Denton was suspended first, publicly, then permanently. The official statement called it a breach of ethical protocol. The unofficial word from insiders, leaked through every corner of the media, was clearer. He had orchestrated a cover-up that nearly collapsed the company's soul. Investors recoiled. Regulatory agencies opened new investigations. Solnera's stock plummeted, then stabilized only after Ethan formally resigned as CEO, citing his failure to act decisively in the face of misconduct. His exit statement was short, handwritten, and posted without fanfare on the company's site. Leadership means knowing when to speak and when to step aside. I should have done both much earlier. This is my reckoning. Let it also be Solnera's rebirth. What followed was not redemption, not yet, but something far more honest: reform. A full internal audit was initiated. Solnera's new interim board included independent environmental scientists and community organizers. Several marketing campaigns were pulled. Funds were reallocated to grassroots carbon reduction efforts. For the first time, the company's famed sustainability platform opened its data for public review. It was not easy. Protests still formed outside their headquarters. Former allies distanced themselves, but a quiet shift had begun. Real work was replacing performance, and the story was no longer about spin. For Piper, everything had changed, and yet nothing at all. She returned to her small apartment, where the kettle still whistled too loudly and the corners still smelled faintly of pine cleaner. But her inbox had transformed. Invitations poured in, speaking requests, consulting offers, think tank positions. Everyone wanted the girl who had stood at the podium and told the truth while the world watched. She declined most of them. It was a modest, anonymous letter that caught her attention. No name on the envelope. Just a seal, green ink pressed into recycled paper. Inside was an offer, an invitation to join a new initiative founded by a coalition of nonprofits, whistleblowers, and independent scientists, Clear Earth. Its mission was simple but radical: full-spectrum transparency for environmental claims. A watchdog not driven by outrage but by evidence. An initiative built not on branding but on truth. They wanted her to lead their storytelling division. Not marketing, not messaging, but storytelling, the honest shaping of facts into voices that people could hear and trust and act upon. She accepted. The work was quiet at first, crafting narratives around soil health and waste equity, interviewing farmers, highlighting community-led projects that had never made headlines. It was slower than tech, less glamorous, but it was real. One afternoon, weeks later, she sat beneath a tree in a city park, not for a gala, not for optics, just to breathe. A shadow crossed her lap. She looked up to find Ethan standing there, holding 2 coffees. "I do not want to interrupt," he said. "I was just passing through." She raised an eyebrow. "You never just pass through." He smiled faintly. "Fair, may I?" She gestured to the grass. He sat beside her. They spoke of small things at first: the weather, the board's next moves, his current project advising local green startups on how not to repeat his mistakes. When the silence returned, it was gentle, earned. "You look lighter," he said at last. She glanced down at the soil, tracing a finger through the dirt. "Because I know where I stand now, and I am not standing in anyone's shadow." He nodded, said nothing. They sat together until the sun dipped low, golden across the leaves. No declarations, no expectations, just something that might begin again, slower this time with deeper roots. Something worth growing. The morning of the launch was clear, unusually so for spring in Oregon. The air held that just-washed scent of rain gone only hours before, the sky a soft wash of blue behind the pale silhouettes of awakening trees. Volunteers were already gathering at the edge of the meadow, where folding chairs had been set in loose semicircles, and a cloth banner fluttered between two cedar posts. Clear Earth Foundation, truth takes root. Piper arrived early as always. She wore no suit, no podium smile, just a linen shirt, rolled sleeves, and a pair of boots still stained with the memory of the reforestation day months before. In her hand she carried a small spade, gifted by a local gardener. Engraved along its wooden handle was a phrase she had come to believe in more than any mission statement: begin again, but begin honestly. The oak stood at the edge of the meadow, towering and gnarled, its branches twisted from years of storms and sunlight alike. It had been chosen deliberately, not for symmetry, not for youth, but for endurance. It had watched the land change, held fast while the world moved around it. This, Piper thought, is what we should be building toward. Not perfection, not performance, but presence. She heard his footsteps before she saw him. Ethan emerged from the path behind her, dressed simply, his expression calm but open. No press behind him, no entourage, just him. They exchanged no greeting at first, just a quiet nod, and then he joined her at the base of the oak. She handed him the sapling, an Oregon white oak, carefully cultivated, its roots wrapped in damp burlap. He took it gently, cradling it as though it were something fragile. Together they knelt at the earth. No cameras clicked, no speeches were made. Piper dug the first inch. Ethan followed. Soil crumbled between their fingers, rich and dark. When they lowered the sapling into the ground, their hands brushed for a moment, covered in dirt, warm with memory. Neither pulled away. As they covered the roots and pressed the soil into place, Piper glanced up at the old tree overhead. "We are still going to get things wrong," she said quietly. "Probably," Ethan replied. "But we will not hide it." "No," he said, "not anymore." They stepped back, side by side, and watched the sapling settle into its place beneath the watch of its ancient kin. No declarations, no promises, just a silence that was not empty but full, of beginning, of understanding, of something planted not to impress but to endure. And beneath that silence, under open sky and honest ground, something new began to grow.